Paisley, in your opinion, are Latina women naturally submissive women?
I think it depends. I think the Latinas here in the United States are following a different culture than if you were living in, for example, I'm from Nicaragua and Venezuela. I was born in Nicaragua, raised in Venezuela. So I think that the culture is different once you go into our country. Ali's talking about Puerto Rican culture, which is very close to American culture. So I think it differs a little bit. And I don't know if Latin Spain and you can, I don't know if you have a little more in-depth knowledge about that. That's how I see it.
I don't know. I would like to ask Ali because I don't know if she was raised here in the States. I was raised in the island.
Okay.
So yes, I see the difference major. Like I agree with you 100%. The Puerto Rican culture here is very, very much American rather than the culture back at home where it's completely different. So I think I agree with you. It all depends on the location because everyone that's here, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily related to the people per se. It's just, I'd like to call it Americanisms, you know, to a degree. American women overall, because of the culture of the country, follow a different path. The dream for women here it's a little different than the dream for us back at home in Latin America. So of course it's going to look like that from the outside looking in.
So you know what's interesting? So I would just, this is just something that I noticed because I live, in California, and there's a huge Latino population out here, primarily Mexicans, a lot of Mexicans, Salvadorians in certain spots. And I remember back when I was working at this country club, and it was like an entire family that was working there with me. And there was this one girl in particular, I think she was like 17, 18, really young. And I remember having a conversation with her one day, and she was like, man, like I need to have a baby. Like I'm getting old. And I'm like, what? Like you're like 19. And she was like, so pressed to have a kid. Like she was literally like, I need to have a baby. But she was from El Salvador. So we talked back and forth, and eventually I figured, I was like, maybe this is a cultural difference, because I'm like, that wasn't what I heard growing up. It was very much like, no, you don't even think about kids, like career, like all of that. But this is a woman who would come over from another nation, and she's so pressed to have a kid at like 19. And at that point, I was thinking, like, I think this has to be a cultural difference, because where is this pressure coming from? I thought it was so interesting. So yeah. I don't know if that's something, like, if you could speak to some of the core differences or key differences that you notice coming from the islands versus being now the USA.
Well, in the Caribbean, at least, there's not like, I would say, if we let Luke Hasley explain, like even in her country, both of her countries, you will see even a difference among like the Caribbean Latinos and South America or Central American Latinos. There's a lot of differences there, just like there's a difference between the diaspora of Latinos and Latinos from Latin America, because I think femininity is always going to be tied to industrialization of a country. The more you need a man for your day-to-day life, the more feminine you're going to tend to be, depending on how the country is developed. So the less developed the country is, or the less industrialized that country is, of course, the women are going to deem the man, quote unquote, obsolete. So with that being said, in Puerto Rico, there was a time where the island was booming to a degree. That was in the 90s and the 80s because of the industrialization. So we started seeing a shift, not as major as the US, but we started seeing a shift towards feminism to a degree. Still conserving the aspect of staying in your marriage. I think one thing that people, I want to clarify when people say that we're more submissive or feminine and whatnot, one thing that I would say is that Latino marriage retention is what's better. We tend to not leave. It doesn't matter how poor quality or good quality your marriage is. We are taught not to divorce. It doesn't matter, even in situations where, and I don't agree with that, of course, but even in situations that we all have friends and families that have been in marriages that are not necessarily even safe, and they tend to stay. So in my opinion, that varies even within Latin countries of the Caribbean. I would say in Cuba, there's even more feminist femininity in that island specifically because of the regime that they've been living under. Then after that, it's Puerto Rico. Even though we're still having children out of wedlock at a 38%, we still have 62% of the women married. But then there's the Dominican Republic, which I've heard a lot of many people saying that they will go find a wife over there. There is a chaos in marriage happening right now in the DR. As DR it's moving forward and modernizing itself, the less women are marrying in the Dominican Republic today, unfortunately.
Very, very, very interesting. I always wondered too about, this is maybe another question, but like, I kind of wonder about this whole idea that's popular there about like passport bros and then going into another country and like picking like the top women. That's a whole nother question, but I just think about like, what are the local guys thinking?